The underlying thesis of our D&D business is all about digital. This is a direct quote from the CEO of Hasbro, Chris Cocks, during the company's most recent earnings call, and I think it says a lot about the direction the company is taking the game, the type of consumer that they're chasing, and the future of the brand as a whole. I think it's probably pretty clear at this point that the landscape of Dungeons & Dragons, particularly since the beginning of the One D&D era, has forever changed, and it's only going to continue to change over the coming years. While One D&D may not officially be classified as a new edition, it is certainly about to usher in a completely new way for people to engage and experience the game, possibly at the expense of some long-term fans, but I don't think it's necessarily all bad. Let's talk about it. For the record, this is obviously not some completely new revelation. Since its announcement 1 year ago, it was made clear that the One D&D moniker was intended to represent much more than just the Dungeons & Dragons tabletop game. Even the FAQ on the D&D Beyond website says that One D&D is the 2024 core rulebooks, D&D Beyond, and the D&D digital play experience. The name One D&D was intended to be all-encompassing and represent the coming together of all of these different aspects of the game in an effort to, and I'll quote them again, give you more D&D wherever you play, whenever you want. Taken at face value, this proposal doesn't sound so bad. I think most fans would love to have access to more content, provided that content is of a certain quality that they expect and doesn't come at the expense of other facets of the game. The trouble is that seems to be the exact opposite of what's happening. In late 2022, Wizards of the Coast CEO Cynthia Williams pretty famously stated that she felt that the Dungeons & Dragons brand was being under-monetized. This obviously sparked a lot of concern in the community about what this means for the future of the game and how it would impact us, the players. From her comments though, I think it was reasonably clear that she was not really speaking about the game directly, but rather the entire ecosystem that exists around the game. Minis, dice, toys, movies, games, the virtual tabletop, all of these represent different aspects that surround Dungeons & Dragons, but have little to no impact on how you play or experience the game. Save for the VTT, but it's not like that's a requirement to play. This probably also explains why we have D&D themed snowboards for reasons. The company is desperate to expand the reach of the brand beyond the enthusiasts who have loved and played the tabletop game for decades. They are trying to capitalize on the massive momentum that 5th edition brought to the game and capture new players of any familiarity or experience level. The end of August is almost here and I'm getting so close to hitting the 3,000 subscriber mark. If you would like to support me in reaching that goal, a sub to the channel would be incredible. Thank you so much. To be clear, I'm not saying that all of this is necessarily a bad thing, not even from an enthusiast perspective. It's not uncommon for businesses to use proceeds from a larger mass market product to help fund their more niche ones. To use a modern example, and for anyone interested in the world of electric cars, Lotus, a brand famous for making small, fun, quick sports cars, has just announced a large, full-size 5-seater family SUV. And while this car essentially fundamentally imposes the entire ethos of the Lotus brand, most still embrace the new car as they know that its existence will help continue funding the types of vehicles that they expect and want from Lotus. The thing with Dungeons & Dragons is that they aren't really doing any of that. Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro aren't really trying to channel the profits from their D&D snowboards into making the tabletop game a best-in-class experience for the hardcore long-term fans. They're instead seemingly trying to dilute the game experience so that it can be easier than ever to get started and play the game. To continue with my car analogy, it would be like Lotus or Ferrari canceling all of their sports cars and only making large family-sized SUVs because they know that's what will sell better, despite it potentially having a harmful impact on the brand for many people. I do want to emphasize that I don't think that expanding the appeal of the game to a mass market is a bad thing. It's just kind of the way that they're going about it, which maybe leaves a little bit of a bad taste in many people's mouths. This, I think, is where things start to get even more complicated. I've said before, and I still maintain, that I don't think that the One D&D tabletop game, or D&D 24, or whatever it's going to be called, is going to be a bad game. On the contrary, I think it's probably going to be a lot of fun for what it is, which is to say a more streamlined, new player-friendly version of 5th edition. I don't know whether it will be better or worse, that's a pretty personal decision for everyone to decide for themselves. What I can say is that for better or worse, it will be different, and not just because the rules are getting some modifications, but because the way that Wizards of the Coast wants us to engage with the game will, for the first time, be primarily digitally. This shift will be a big departure not only for Wizards of the Coast, but also for players. Up until 2020, the primary way that we played D&D was in person, with physical books and miniatures and terrain and maps. It was a very tactile and engaging experience. However, everything changed with the COVID lockdowns, which not only led to a huge surge in the popularity of the game, but also to an incredible uptick in the usage of virtual tabletops like Roll20. Even for me, my home game has fully converted to online through Roll20. While I do truly miss playing in person, and I do believe that it is the most fun way to play, I can't argue with the convenience and flexibility of playing online, especially when some people in my group now live thousands of kilometers apart. The point is that Wizards of the Coast wants us to play D&D in the future online, and ideally through their virtual tabletop, which is still currently in development. This will also unlock yet another element of recurring revenue for them, as they will undoubtedly be charging multiple tiers of subscription fees for different types of content for the VTT. I would be truly shocked if the ability to create and manipulate existing content wasn't gated behind a higher tier paywall. But even ignoring the VTT and looking at the books themselves, it's clear that they are almost actively discouraging the purchase of physical content if we consider the recent price increase on the books. While yes, supply shortages and inflation can absolutely represent a portion of the hike, it's also possible that the company is simply ordering fewer physical books, which leads to lower volume discounts from their publisher. The thing is though, it doesn't really matter because in either case, it simply makes the digital purchase just that much more appealing. One point I do want to make is that I don't think that the digital focus is actually all that bad. There's a lot of ways where it's just better. In addition to the convenience that I mentioned earlier, especially combined with the ability to more seamlessly play with people who don't live near each other, there is also the whole ecosystem play. Much like Apple, Wizards of the Coast wants you to exist in their bubble where you buy their books digitally through D&D Beyond, you create your characters on that site too, you play your weekly games on their VTT since why wouldn't you? You just bought the book on D&D Beyond, so it's just that much easier to keep everything in one place. If your world is online D&D, then there isn't really much of a better value proposition than this. But if you're more concerned about the industry as a whole, competition, and the TTRPG landscape, it's hard to ignore how potentially problematic this whole thing is. I'm not going to get all into the doom and gloom on that though. Cody from Taking 20 released a great video all about it when the D&D Beyond purchase happened, so if you somehow missed that, I'll link it in the description below. The thing is though, there is one other element to the digital push that is actually genuinely positive and I'm incredibly enthusiastic about it, and that is accessibility. I, like many of the people who play the game I am sure, have a disability. I have fairly poor vision. For me, it makes the physical books essentially completely inaccessible and useless for me. The text is far too small for me to comfortably read, grid lines can be challenging to see, and the need to constantly refer to handwritten notes can also be problematic. For me and others with motor issues or even other disabilities, playing using physical content can almost be a non-starter, and that is truly such a shame because despite the difficulty in doing it, I do truly love it. But this is the major upside that playing in a digital space affords me and others with various accessibility needs. I can make the font as big as I need to be, I can zoom in on grid maps, I have books with embedded links to each other, and there's even digital dice available. Whatever your take on the digital push for Dungeons & Dragons, it's really hard to deny the advantages it provides those of us who can't use the printed materials for one reason or another. If we pivot back to the original quote I started the video with, it's clear that Chris Cocks is talking way beyond the Dungeons & Dragons game. When he says digital, he is also referring to things like the incredibly popular and critically acclaimed Baldur's Gate 3 from Larian Studios. During the same call, he says, "I think Baldur's Gate 3 is just the first of several new digital initiatives that you're going to see from us that span how we try to transform tabletop role-playing game to an even richer kind of theater of the mind experience to more traditional video games." What this quote tells us, beyond the fact that it's unclear if he actually even knows what theater of the mind means, is that Baldur's Gate 3 was just the beginning and the company clearly plans to double down on the success of the game and continue to ride out that momentum. However, the question is, as Ted from Nerd Immersion mentioned, is Hasbro willing to be as patient in the future with other titles as they were with Larian and Baldur's Gate 3? Larian Studios was given years and years of time to develop the game and even had a huge portion of that development time accessible through an early access beta. Will they be willing to wait that long again if it means that the product will be of the same quality, or are they simply going to try and pump out something quickly to see what kind of revenue they can generate quickly? This is a really interesting question, and it's something that only time will tell. Perhaps they were only willing to be patient with Larian since this was their first true foray into a genuine D&D experience video game in a very long time. Shout out to my fellow Warriors of the Eternal Sun fans. I think when it comes down to it, digital doesn't have to be the boogeyman that it's made out to be. There's a lot of upsides to it, from the sheer convenience to accessibility, and just having the opportunity to experience something that you love and are passionate about in a different form like what we've got with Baldur's Gate 3, or hey, maybe a VR version of the virtual tabletop. There's a lot to explore in the digital realm. What disappoints me is that it truly does appear that they are exploring the digital space at the expense of the physical one, and are doing so simply by chasing anyone willing to throw any amount of money at D&D post-it notes or whatever, rather than catering to the people that actually made the game what it is today. It's a business though, I get it, and I can fully understand and accept that without having to love it though. Let me know what you think about the digital future of Dungeons & Dragons in the comment below, and subscribe to help me reach my goal of 3,000 subscribers by the end of August. Check out some of my other One D&D videos, and take care.